The human being is a peculiar specimen. Instead of improving life, what truly comforts many is seeing others struggle, and if they're worse off, even better. Other people's suffering works like a placebo. Take Tyrone and Keisha in the neighborhood. They can barely afford a meal, and half the time they get mugged the moment they step outside. But now, thanks to YouTube, they can console themselves with some empty phrase. Yeah, things are bad here, but look at this other country. They're miserable because it's cold. A pathetic placebo, but hey, it does the job. Let's start with the undeniable, something beyond any subjective interpretation. Estonia's weather is absolutely brutal. Calling it extreme would be putting it mildly. Winters are endless, freezing and dark. Brace yourself, because your little lads will shrivel up like two tiny marbles. Temperatures can drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius, and if you've got a bit of Dracula or Nosferatu in you, you might actually enjoy the darkness. In December and January, you'll barely get 6 hours of daylight. Keep in mind the lack of sun can mess with your mood, unless, of course, you're already dead inside. Don't be such a crybaby. It's not that you're asterisk poor, though, let's be honest, you probably are. It's just that Estonia isn't cheap. Life here is pretty expensive, even when measured against local wages. Sure, Estonia is cheaper than its Nordic neighbour Finland, but prices in Tallinn have shot up, especially when it comes to housing. Wages and spare change don't always stretch far enough for a comfortable life, especially when compared to Western Europe. So if you were planning to live like a king, well, think more along the lines of a budget-conscious peasant. This might sound like bad news, but only for the ladies. In Estonia, there are 87 men for every 100 women. Now take it easy, Tyrone. Before you quit your supermarket job, cash in your severance, and sprint to the airport with your life savings, there's something you need to know. This fortunate imbalance only kicks in after age 55. Because Estonian women outlive the blokes by an average of 10 years. So unless your big plan is to sweep widows off their feet at the senior centre, you might want to rethink your strategy. Take it easy, Panchito. Tone down your social charms and that unbearable urge to impose what some dare call reggaeton and Latin music. It's not that Estonians are cold, but to a foreigner they can often seem distant. Why? Well, simple. This isn't exactly the kind of place where making friends or fitting in happens overnight. Unless you learn the language and develop some serious patience, you'll probably feel like an outsider for quite a while. So save your pareo for the shower. Estonia isn't begging for a Latin invasion. public healthcare is free, but don't get too excited. The waiting lists are long and the quality of care can be a bit hit or miss. Many end up turning to private healthcare, which, as you might imagine, doesn't come cheap. Don't worry, it's not that you're that dumb or that learning is beyond you. The local language is just a bit of a nightmare. Estonian is tricky to pick up and has zero relation to Spanish or English. Sure, many people speak English, especially in the capital, Tallinn, but don't get too comfortable, because once you step into the rural areas, English is about as common as a unicorn. So unless you're planning to become fluent in a language that practically no one else uses, you might want to start practicing your charade skills. If you're the modern, colourful type, this might be bad news. But if you're like me, one of those who enjoys the old school, then you'll be happy to know that despite its growth, Estonia remains a pretty homogeneous country. You won't find much in the way of diverse food, entertainment, or multicultural events like you would in other European countries. So if you've got a hankering for something beyond basic sausages and potatoes, or you were hoping for a bustling cultural scene, you might end up feeling like a fish out of water. Estonia's economy is deeply rooted in the tech sector and a thriving ecosystem of small, innovative businesses. Thanks to its digital advancements and government digitalization, the country has become a paradise for those working in areas like IT, cybersecurity, and digital business. However, outside of these sectors, the job market can be a bit limited. If you don't have training or experience in those fields, your job prospects will probably be as exciting as a line of ants. Jobs outside the tech sector tend to be less specialized, and generally they don't offer competitive salaries. So unless you fancy working for peanuts, or hummus if you're feeling exotic, you might need to rethink your options. Since 2013, public transport in Tallinn, the capital, is free. Yes, you heard right. Both trams and buses won't cost you a thing. But step outside the capital and that's where the fun begins. Or rather doesn't begin. Public transport outside Tallinn is limited, with connections between cities few and far between. Prepare yourself for long waits in the middle of winter, where temperatures can dip much lower than zero. Trains and buses might be as frequent as a solar eclipse. So if you plan to travel, make sure you've got plenty of time and a good coat. Estonia's relationship with its neighbour Russia has historically been tense, much like other countries in the region. It's tough for them to divorce the modern-day Russia from the Soviet Union of old. Though it's rarely brought up, and verging on being a social taboo, the Russian population in Estonia is quite significant. Back in 2009, they made up over 25% of the total population, although only 15% spoke Russian regularly. So, while you may not hear much about it, the presence of the Russian community is hard to ignore, even if it's somewhat of a delicate subject. This point is pretty subjective, but we'll throw it in anyway, just to give you another argument to justify or soften all the discomforts of your homeland. For some, there's a lack of warmth in social life. The streets can be pretty deserted in winter, and thankfully the locals aren't as big on partying as folks in Southern Europe or Latin America. If you're into those gorritas or queens with hairy armpits and a side of empowerment, or you love those people who are devoted to omnipresent social noise, all disguised as good vibe, then Estonia is probably not the best place to find them. But if you prefer a quieter, more reserved atmosphere, well, you've hit the jackpot. In summary, Estonia can be an excellent place if you appreciate peace and quiet, advanced technology, and extreme cold. But it's not for everyone. Despite the challenges mentioned, and as we've shown in previous videos, the country is a role model in many ways. In fact, it has more virtues than flaws, and it's a perfect example of how a small country can make its mark on the global stage. Thanks for sticking with us until the end. If you liked the video, and I really hope you did, just hit that like button and let us know in the comments if you consider living in this country. We'll be seeing you in this content I've left for you right here, or in a few days with a new video. Bye.